We're at the IAS meeting, and we're meeting with Amara Ezeamama,
Yes.
and she's with Michigan State University.
Yes.
And we appreciate your taking the time. The work that you're doing is on adolescents up to school age
to adolescents.
And you're trying to see survival and quality of life.
Yes.
And it's within Uganda.
It's within Uganda.
So tell us about this.
So we're really in a very fortunate part of HIV story right now. And I say fortunate not to minimize how difficult things are still, but the idea that we're seeing a population of children that we have not usually seen in large numbers. These are children who are infected through their mothers, who acquire the infection, and then go on to live into school age and adolescence. And so my question, all thanks to the fact that HEART seems to have worked wonders in allowing us to see these children, is whether they are alive with function. So can they learn like other children? What is the quality of life? When they get into adolescence, how do they psychosocially adjust in terms of depression, self-esteem, and other type of parameters? And comparing them not just to exposed, because we really are looking at three groups of children. One is the child who's exposed and infected. The other is a child who's exposed and did not get infected. So all HIV affected but without infection. And then the child who is never exposed, never infected. So we think...
What's the breakdown on the numbers on that?
So ultimately...
Is it pretty even?
We're aiming for pretty even. My pilot study, I was able to get pretty even breakdown, but we're going to be going up to 300 mother-child pairs. So, the goal is to get 100 in each of the arms. And then, really be able to look at HIV-affected context. If you're exposed or you're infected, compared to a baseline of no infection.
Males and females?
Males and females.
But do you think you're going to have about even?
In our pilot study, we had about even. So I think it should not be that far. I don't have any reason, because it's perinatal infection, we think it will probably be 50-50.
It's just interesting to see if there's any differences on the outcomes.
I think that
male to female.
I think that we expect that there could be a difference, because when it comes to psychosocial adjustment, a lot of these are no longer medical. The questions are not so much medicalized as it is. They have to live in a context with stigma, with social structures, the kind of things that is not medicalized, that continues to affect a lot of the outcomes that HIV affected people who are on treatment. So that affect how treatments work, and it may differ by male or female. So that I think that could be important. But for a lot of the outcomes we're looking at, though, when we measure cognitive function, for example, we scale it differently for male and female, just because it is normed. And when you have young children, if you're all young relatives, you see that little girls kind of develop cognitively at a different pace. It's not more, it's not less, it's just different than little boys. And so we basically try to normalize that a little boy, a little girl would be a little girl. And so there's a natural gender difference in terms of how that breaks down on a natural developmental stage. So our instruments is basically scaled in a way that takes account of that.
It's going to be a long term.
It is. So the outcomes are long term. We see them at 6 years old. Remember, their infection is through their parents. So we see 6 years and beyond, and then we follow them for 18 months. So it is long term, but it's also prospective.
So are you're doing this study in Uganda? Are you taking any special? What are the? Is there any benefits to getting in this protocol?
So this is not an intervention study. So obviously we don't have the issue of some kids because right now we just don't understand how functional or what is the relative deficit. And then more importantly, or just as importantly, the instruments we use when we measure cognition, for example, we look at different domains of cognition. Because if you want to have an intervention, it would be good to target where you have the largest deficit. So we look at overall, we look at domain specific, whether it's quality of life or psychosocial adjustment, to allow us get a sense of how should we intervene, what kind of difference is there. And in fact, we expect there are some things we think we would find. For example, infected child we expect to perform lower than an uninfected child, exposed or never exposed. But I think the other question still remains, if a child is exposed and uninfected, are they the same as a community control child who is never exposed, never infected? My hypothesis is that that would not be the case, but we don't know. And even though that exposed negative child will be better than infected, we think that because they live in an HIV affected context, they are dealing with stigma in their in their overall context, and maybe poverty and other things, that they would have a net lower outcomes overall. But we just don't know. The data is not yet there, and then if we understand that, then we can think of how to help.
So would you explain the CIFER grant that you got and explain that, so forth?
Sure. So the CIFER grant, I'm just so grateful to be finally funded through them. I had when I 3 years ago, or maybe the first or second cycle, I had applied and I actually proposed to do this same study, but by that time we had no pilot data, and I didn't actually recognize how competitive it was.
So you were prepared this time.
So they didn't fund it, and I went ahead and found the money through other source, very little to do the same study at a very, very small scale. And so now that the CIFER, so this round of applications, when I put it in, they invited us back, and so we were fortunately funded. But what the CIFER allows us to do, which was really like the timing is, couldn't have, sometimes you're just, with research, you're just on the verge, you're like, oh my God, can somebody help? It allows us to now, we've looked at this and we see some trends, and so now we can enroll more children, and then we can actually, get a better sense of, are the differences we're seeing clinically relevant? Because sometimes you see these small blips of differences, but your sample is too small, you just are so under-resourced in what you're doing that you need more data to actually go like, is this something we should be able to work on? So it really allows us to go out and do a better job doing that, and and then be really quite competitive for getting at the question you asked. Now what do we do? Because the whole point of this is, so what? How do we improve lives? And so if all things go well, we can get the information we need to say this is the package of interventions that would be necessary so that these kids might be able to be in school. And actually, because we see there's some smattering of data, and our preliminary data suggests that school function is a problem. These kids are not doing well in school, and I think that HIV perinatally it's not exactly equal to diabetes, but I think it's close in terms of the chronicity of it. And we have ways to have kids who have serious chronic conditions in school and functional, and diabetes is but one. And I think if we think of HIV in that model, then we need to understand how we can get to improving those children.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me. Is there anything else that you're looking to do? I guess this is going to take a lot of your devoted time. I'm in the Department of Psychiatry. I'm now fortunately doing mostly research. So I will be doing other studies, but this would be my first PI-initiated study, thanks to CIFER. So this would be 1/3 of my time, and then we'll be writing up the manuscript and positioning ourselves to hopefully get more funds to do work. Maybe it will publish.
Yes, definitely publish. Without that, you can't get money.
Publish or perish.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for visiting with us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.